A very good afternoon to all the students. In today's session, we are going to discuss one of the very important concept in the C programming language, that is function. In the earlier sessions, we have discussed that the C programming language follows a programming paradigm called as POP. The POP stands for Procedure Oriented Programming. We are not going into what actually is the function right now. We are just introducing the concepts of why these functions are required, right? So there are two types of programming paradigms. What do you mean by programming paradigm? Paradigm is nothing but a model that you follow to implement or to give the solution to a particular problem. That is called as programming paradigm. So any programming language you take, they are categorized into two programming paradigms. One is the POP and the other one is OOP. POP is a short form for the procedure oriented programming. As you can see that this is an acronym, right? POP. And the other programming paradigm under which the programming languages fall is OOP. OOP stands for Object Oriented Programming. So basically these are the two programming models that we means the programmers are going to follow. That is the procedure oriented programming, and the second one is the object oriented programming. Out of these two, the most frequently used programming paradigm is the object oriented programming. Why? Because this object oriented programming is used to model the real world objects, whereas this procedure oriented programming is used before the invention of this object oriented programming. This is also a popular programming paradigm, but once you got this OOPS concepts, the procedure oriented programming has decreased its popularity. But you can observe here that the C programming language, which we are going to discuss in these few sessions, they will follow the programming paradigm which is called as POP. POP stands for procedure oriented programming. The name itself is saying that it is going to depend, that means the programming model is going to depend on the procedures. We have discussed what a procedure is in the earlier classes, right? So a procedure is otherwise called as subroutine, or it can be called as a routine, and in some programming language we can call them as functions. These are the various names we have for the functions. Some programming language they call them as functions, some they call them as routines, and some they call them as subroutines, and some programming language they call it as procedures. So what does this procedure oriented programming means is, whatever task you are given, the programmer is given, you need to give the solution to that particular problem in terms of procedures, or in terms of functions, or in terms of routines. That is called as the procedure oriented programming. So whenever a problem is given to the programmer, he always thinks of in terms of giving the solution in terms of functions only. So for this procedure oriented programming, the functions plays very important role. In fact, you can say that you don't have a program written in the procedure oriented programming without functions. So this is very important feature. Right. So one important point I told in the procedure oriented programming is you cannot have the programs written using POP without functions. So there should be at least one function should be there to address the problem or to give the solution to the problem. At least one function should be there. And in the previous sessions also we have discussed that you can write a program, you can write a C program by using any number of functions. You can split the problem into any number of functions. It is accepted. But I told that out of all these functions, one function is a mandatory function which you have to name it as the main function. Right. So one important point you have to remember here is the procedure oriented programming follows the concept of procedures. That means any problem can be given a solution in terms of functions. So you have to write a program using this procedure oriented programming by having at least one function defined to give the solution to the problem. This is the importance of function. So blindly you have to remember that without functions there is no C program. Right. So if somebody asks you what is the importance of program, you can simply and blindly say that there is no C programming language without functions. That is the introduction to the importance of functions. Right. So as I told that whenever you are given a problem, you can divide that large problem into some basic building blocks. Some basic building blocks, and these basic building blocks we are calling them as the functions. Right. So this is the importance of the functions. Blindly remember that without functions there is no C programming language. There is nothing to address or nothing to give a solution to the problem in the C programming language without the help of functions. So this is the importance of functions. So with this clarity, let us move our concept or let us move our discussion into very important concept which is called as the definition of the function. So if somebody asks you what is a function in C, you should be in a position to explain it, right? So the definition of a function is a function is nothing but a set of statements. We know what these statements are. These statements are nothing but instructions to the computer. So a function is nothing but a set of statements or a group of statements, and those set of statements can perform one particular task. So this is the definition of a function in C programming language. A function is a set of statements or instructions that can perform only one particular task. Right. So with this definition in our mind, let us move our topic towards the function definition. Here you should be very careful and you should observe one important point: the difference between the definition of the function and the function definition. The definition of the function says how we are going to define the function. It's nothing but set of statements that can perform one particular task. But the function definition means it specifies the syntax, how we are going to define the function in the C programming language. We'll see what are all the advantages and disadvantages of these functions once we clear all the concepts related to these functions, right? So let us move our topic of interest towards the syntax of function definition. It's a very important concept. Please concentrate. The syntax of a function in C starts with a return type. And after this return type, we have some space. And after space, we have the function name. And after this function name, we have this parenthesis. And within the parenthesis, you have to give the parameters list. And after this, you have to make use of a opening curly brace. And within this opening curly brace, you can write any number of statements. And once you want to close the function, you can close it by using a closed curly brace. So this is the very important point. You should be very careful that the syntax of function definition in a C programming language is it starts with a return type. I'll tell you what all these things are. And after return type, we have the function name. And after function name, we have the list of parameters that should be specified inside the parenthesis. And then we have the opening curly brace ending with the closed curly brace. And one more important thing you should observe here is we can divide the function definition into two parts. The first part is this one, which includes the return type, the function name, and the parameter list. This we can call it as the header of the function. Header of the function. And the second part of the function definition is from here to here. This we can call it as the body of the function. Very simple thing. This is to just to understand the concept and just to memorize the things very easily, right? So the function definition is divided into head and body. Head consists of three parts. The first one is the return type. The second one is the function name, which we can also call it as the identifiers. So we have different rules for the identifiers, like it should start with only alphabets, it should not start with digits. All these things we have, right? We have 5 to 6 rules where we need to follow for these identifiers in C. So the function name is also one of the identifier. So whatever rules we have for these identifiers, they can be applied for these function names also. And the third important part of the header of the function is the parameter list. And the body of the function starts from the opening curly brace and ends at the closed curly brace. And as I told that any number of statements you can include within the body of the function. I will give you one example so that it will be very clear for you, right? So let us discuss each and every part of this particular function definition. The first part, let us go with the header. As I told that the header consists of three parts. The first one is the return type. The second one is the function name. The third one is the parameter list. By looking at this first part, that is the return type, the name itself is giving some idea that it is going to return, or it is going to specify the type of data it is going to return. So the main functionality of this function is it is going to perform one task, right? So when it is going to perform one task, it may give some outputs or it may not give some output. It may or may not give the output. But whenever a function is performing a task and it is returning some and it is giving some output, that output will be returned in terms of this return type. So we can say that this return type can be the output of the function. What value it is going to return, that is specified by this output, and that is called as the return type. So it is going to specify what type of data it is going to return, the function is going to return. Whether the function is going to return the integer data type, or whether it is going to return the floating point value, or it is going to return the character, string, whatever it may be, anything you can take it, right? So that is the importance of this return type. Return type specifies the type of value that is returned by the function. And coming to the second part, which is nothing but the function name. As I told that the function name is nothing but the name of the function, right? We have a long discussion in the previous sessions that in C programming language, anything you want to address, it should have a name. That is nothing but the identifier. In the similar fashion, whenever you want to address a function, it should have a name. So that name is specified by this function name. So this is the actual name of the function. And as I told that all the rules that are applied for the identifiers can also be applied for this function name also. Very important. And the third one is the parameter list. These parameters are otherwise called as arguments. This terminology is very important. You should be familiar with the terminology in order to have a sound knowledge in the programming languages. So parameters are otherwise called as the arguments. What are these parameters? As I told that the return type is something that is given as the output from the function. So what value it is going to return? Is it going to return the integer, float, character? That specifies the value, that specifies the output of the function. But in some situations, functions are ready to accept the inputs from the external world. External world means don't think in a sci-fi introduction, right? So you just think that the function is going to accept some inputs from the other functions in the program. Whenever a function is going to accept the inputs from the external world, those inputs to the function is given in terms of the parameter list. So we can call this parameter list as the inputs to the function. These are not only the inputs. There can be many inputs, but when it wants to communicate with the other external functions in the program, when it wants to receive some input from the external functions, then it is going to do it with the help of these parameters. We can call these parameters, we can think of these parameters as the placeholders. Right, placeholders means they are going to hold some value which can be used in the function. Right. And remember that you can have a list of parameters. And one more important point regarding this return type, the function may or may not return, may or may not return a value. In the similar fashion, a function may or may not have arguments. It's not mandatory that all the functions should have the arguments. All the functions should have the inputs to be taken from the external world. There can be some functions which does not accept any inputs. Right. So important point you should observe here is the return type may or may not, the parameter list may or may not. And whenever I say the parameter list in C programming language, the list of values are always separated by an operator which is called as comma operator. So if you have two parameters, you can give the two parameters separated by the comma. If you have four parameters, the four parameters should be given as a list separated by the comma. We will see some more important points regarding this parameter list once we go into the example part. So there we will discuss, right? And remember that return type is optional. Similarly, parameter list is also optional. This is all about the header of the function. Header consists of three parts: return type, function name, and parameter list. And coming to the body of the function is nothing but a set of braces, curly braces. But this body of the function is the only part which consists of statements that can perform the task. For example, if you are going to write a function that adds two integer values and gives the result, in such case you have to write some statements, you have to give some instructions to the computer. Those statements and instructions are specified inside the body only. So the function body plays very important role. Of course, it appears as if it is nothing, right? No specific parts are there to divide it and explain it. Only it consists of two curly braces where you can include lot of statements in between these two curly braces. But that is not the thing. The entire functionality, what the function is going to do, what it is going to output, what it is going to take, everything, every statement will be included inside the body of the function. So it is nothing but a collection of statements. This is where we have seen this definition of the function. It's a set of statements or collection of statements. So all the collection of statements that define what the function has to perform will be specified in the body of the function. Right. So till now we have seen the importance of functions in the C programming language. We have seen the definition of the function, which says that the set of statements or the collection of instructions that can perform one particular task is called as the function in C programming language. And we have seen the syntax for defining a function, how we are going to define the function in C. It consists of two major parts, the header part and the body, header of the function and the body of the function. The header of the function is again divided into two parts. One is the three parts. One is the return type, which specifies the type of value the function is going to return, and the second one is the function name, which is nothing but the actual name of the function, and the third part is the list of parameters which the function is going to accept from the external world. And the second part is the body of the function. So the body of the function is nothing but it contains the collection of statements that define what function has to do. Let us have an example, then it will be very clear for you, right? Let us start our discussion with the main. Let us start with the sum of two integer values. I want to define a function which performs the sum of two integer values and returns the result. Very simple thing, right? So I need to define a function. You have to write the function definition. So what you have to do, the function definition, as I told, that it consists of two parts, the header part and the body part. The header part consists of the return type. Let us forget about what it is going to return. And the second part is the function name. Since I am going to calculate the sum of two integer values, I am going to name this function as sum underscore two underscore integers. This is my function name. It is accepted. Why? Because it follows the identifier rules. It is starting with a digit. It is not starting with any integer. No special characters are there except underscore, accepted. So everything, every rule it is following. Therefore, the entire sum underscore two underscore integers is my function name. And here you can see how many integer values it is going to take. It is going to find the sum of two integer values. So I can make my function to accept two integer variables. I am going to accept two integer variables. One is integer and another one is integer. Right. Two integer variables means, let me take the variable names as int x and int y. After this, I put my curly braces like this. This is the body of the function. And within the body of the function, I need to write the statements that constitute the addition of these two integers and returns the result, right? So what I will do is, I will create another variable called int result, and I will add these two values x and y and put it inside this result variable, and I am going to return the result. Very simple function we have here. Now you can observe here that the last statement is return of result. So result is a variable of type integer. So the return type of the function, so it is going to return the integer, right? So the return type is integer. This is an example of a function definition for sum of two integers, which accepts two integer variables, finds the result, that is addition of those two values, stores it in result and returns that result. So this entire part, int sum underscore two integers, int x comma int y, this is called as the header of the function. And from here, these three statements, 1, 2, 3, these three statements constitute the body of the function. So this is all about the example part of the function definition. So that's all for this today's session. In the next class, we are going to discuss about some more important concepts that are related to these functions. So thank you one and all for joining the session.